Do you struggle to stick with and stay motivated during long-term projects because you get distracted by new project ideas or new patterns? In today's video, I'm going to share 5 tips on staying motivated that I learned while I worked on my temperature blanket this last year. I also have a bonus tip, so stick around till the end for that. Hey Sugar Snaps, welcome to the channel and congratulations on wrapping up the January challenge. If you followed along with me for the entirety or part of it, I'm super excited by all the progress everyone made and the projects that I worked on, and blessed by everybody's input. It was just a really fun project to do with you all. If you're new to the channel, my name is Brittany. I'm a fiber and textile enthusiast, and I love sharing that here on the channel and on my website, textileindy.com. One of the projects that I finished during the January challenge was this cinema sweater. If you've watched many of my videos, I've been working on this project since last summer. It was sitting in a project bag. I just had one sleeve to finish off. And I realized I was kind of putting it off because I was sad to finish it and see it go. I really love the fit and how it feels. I used Knitting for Olive yarn in merino held with a strand of the soft silk mohair in the colorway Flamingo. It's super cozy, very squishy. It's a very comfortable pattern and material. So I immediately decided that I needed to start another one. So I dyed up some yarn, which I'll be sharing in a video later, and started a second cinema sweater. Even though I have other projects that I wanted to do, I thought, I've already done this pattern. I know how it goes. I know that I like it. I might as well have that as a back burner project. So I'm doing that as my knit walk project, where when I go out for a walk in the morning, I'm taking that knitting project because there's a lot of just plain stockinette stitch. I'm gonna sit here and work on the final rows of my temperature blanket. I will be showing you this at the end of this video. I'm finishing it off and getting it off of my works in progress list because we're in February and this needs to be completed. While I do that, I wanna go over my 5 tips for staying motivated during long-term projects. Tip number 1 is to create a sustainable system. And what I mean by that is a way of doing your project that you'll be able to maintain. So whether that's batching, for example, my temperature blanket, I realized that not every day did I have the bandwidth to sit down and work on this project, especially if I had another project going on. And often evenings were booked out or other things were happening, so I couldn't really sit down every single evening like I had initially intended. So quickly realized that I needed some other system to get my project done, which meant that I ended up batching rows. So I would stack up a few days worth of rows and then try to crochet all those days at once. I just track the weather, have my temperature high list, and then go and do all of those rows at once. So whenever I sat down, I wasn't just doing the single row for the single day. I had a long list of days to complete. And of course, as the year went by and more days went on, I got more and more days added to my list because I wasn't really keeping up with the number of days that I had to work on it. But maintaining that system of sitting down at a regular basis, and mine was once to twice a week in the evenings while watching a movie or TV, and knocking out as many rows as I could during that time frame, and then just maintaining that system was really helpful, having that kind of routine. It also was helpful to have something paired with the project that was an added motivator if for some reason I wasn't feeling like working on it, especially when you're doing something long term and it loses its initial shiny object factor where you are excited to work on it because it's new. It is helpful to have some added motivators. So something like you always sit down with a mug of tea when you work on your blanket, if tea is something that you enjoy, or always sitting down and watching your favorite TV show while you work on your project. And this doesn't apply to just temperature blankets, it's anything that's long term. Mine just happened to be a temperature blanket. So tip number 1 is create a sustainable system. I find that if you develop a type of ritual or kind of compound the pleasant activities that you're doing at once, it's very helpful to continue to be motivated and actually follow through with your time commitment. For example, sitting down with my temperature blanket, my favorite TV show, and a glass of wine, or on a road trip working on my temperature blanket while listening to an audiobook that I was super excited about. I wasn't driving, obviously, my husband was, but pairing different things together, that all of which you enjoy, which just compound the enjoyment and grow it even more. Tip number 2 is track your progress. Now for me, that was temperature blanket related, so it was pretty self-explanatory. Each day I was taking the temperature high of the day, and that corresponded to a color, and then I would crochet that row. If you're working on a different type of pattern, or you're sewing something, you're spinning something, you have maybe a time goal rather than a results goal. Let's say I want to spin for the next 100 days. You don't have a specific amount, you just have a time block, like 15 minutes for the next 100 days. Having some way of tracking your progress, whether that's checking off, I did my 15 minutes today, or I crocheted my temperature blanket row for the day, really is motivating to have that visual, whether you have the whole thing listed out with a checkbox next to it, or you're listing out the steps that you did and then checking them off as you go. Some way of kind of documenting that you're working on it. Another great way that's actually slightly less work is taking a photo of your progress at the end of a time spent working on your thing. So just kind of laying out your thing, whether you do a flat lay of your project and the materials, or you just literally point and shoot with wherever you're at. Having that photo and then you can look through them on your phone is very motivating as well. You can create an album of those photos and have a full collection of progress shots throughout the project that you can look back on. For this temperature blanket, my progress tracker was very, very loose. I started out doing it on my phone and having a list on my phone, but quickly realized that, I don't know, I didn't really want to be on my phone while I was crocheting. It was distracting, so I decided to go with paper. So I have this very unofficial list of the dates and the high temperatures for that day that I've been checking off. So really your tracking system can be as simple as this. I even punched a hole in the paper because I kept losing my crochet hook. So I've been storing my crochet hook tucked in the paper so that I wouldn't lose it. That worked pretty well. So it can be as complex or as loose of a tracking system or motivation system as you want it to be. Tip number 3 is build a support system. Whether that's online or in person, you could be a part of a guild or a group. I know that knit-alongs are very popular because it's a group of people coming together to knit something very similar. And so there's that motivation that there's others doing it along with you, and that can be super encouraging. I know for my temperature blanket, because I was posting it here on my channel and on my social media, I was getting questions about, hey, how's that going? Or I'd love to see an update on your temperature blanket. So that was motivating for me because, one, I had the like commitment to you all that I was actually working on this project, and the commitment to Ganchet, the company that gifted me all this yarn, that I was going to follow through. So there was some added motivation there. But also just that social interaction online was like, oh yeah, okay, I want to make progress on that because I want to show that I made progress and that I am finishing and I'm getting to the end. And that's one of the reasons this video is a thing, because I wanted to wrap this up and I thought doing it on a video would be really helpful. So community can be really important when you're doing things that are in the handcraft realm, because otherwise it can feel very lonely. A lot of this craft is time oriented and lots of time spent working on a thing, and doing that alone can sometimes feel lonely. Not always. I love having time to just relax and do my craft in my studio by myself and have that reflection time, but it's also nice, and I think a lot of people prefer doing it together with others, or just knowing that there are others doing similar things. And that's why we put together the Textile Indie Collective membership program with a community aspect so that we could all connect in a way online, sharing our projects, sharing our experiences, asking questions, and connecting in a meaningful way around textile, fiber, and traditional crafts, and allow you to ask questions if you have them and get feedback and support in your projects. I decided to move in here because the sun was coming in and hitting me in the face. Oh, this thing is so heavy. It's one thing I have learned, practically speaking, that if you're going to crochet a cotton blanket, don't make it so big, or lift weights so you can lift your project around. I had to stop taking this on the road because it's so big I couldn't even get it into the front seat to work on it while my husband was driving. Tip number 4 is to address potential obstacles. This might just be my pessimism coming out and assuming that there is going to be obstacles, but I discovered that that happened to be true, so it worked out. So planning for things that will derail your motivation, like having to weave in tails or do the second sleeve of a sweater or weave multiple rows of the same thing in a tapestry or a basket, spin a plain color that maybe isn't super exciting to watch spin up, like if you're doing white so that you can naturally dye it. So anything that's going to derail your project or your progress. One of the things that I ran into was schedule related. I've mentioned it before, but in the summer we are out and about a lot on the weekends. We like to go out, do outdoor activities, hike, go backpacking, spend time in the garden. The garden was one of my main hobbies over the summer, maintaining it, growing it, just working in the garden and being outside. And so my temperature blanket as my long-term project got put on the back burner, which was totally fine considering that I knew that that was coming ahead and I mentally prepared that I would be behind date-wise when I got to the fall. Another thing for temperature blanket specific was tracking the temperature. I wasn't going on the app and checking the temperature every day and writing that down. I found an app that did a past weather history that would give me the temperature high from days in the past. So I just bookmarked that, and whenever I got behind, I would go reference that, write down like 10 to 15 days worth of temperatures on my little tracker sheet so that I could check them off on paper, and then would reference that to choose the color for the day and get my rows caught up, or mostly caught up. So things like that, systems that you can set in place that will help overcome issues, whether it's tasks that aren't very interesting, like weaving in tails, or you have a time conflict that maybe means that there's a period of time that you're not going to be able to work on it, and you need to be able to get remotivated once that thing passes. I think sometimes if you stop doing something, it can be harder to get started again unless you have a plan to do so. Also, it's really easy to forget what you're working on and what your intentions were if you don't have them written down or planned ahead of time. I guess the biggest one with obstacles is have some sort of touch point, whether it's weekly or monthly, that is a reminder, whether on your calendar app or your phone or somewhere, that reminds you, hey, you were working on this project and you wanted to make progress on it. So where are you at? And how's it going? Because that can sometimes be the little bit of a nudge that maybe it's in your brain, oh, I need to sit down and work on that. But I think sometimes we need a little bit more to motivate us to get over the hump of a challenging part. And tip number 5 is choose colors or materials that you love. If you're working with a material that you don't like, you aren't going to be motivated to work on your project. That's just how it is. If the yarn is too scratchy, or the color is not right, or you just don't like the pattern, then you aren't going to make progress, because why would you? So starting with the materials and thinking through, do I really want to be spending that amount of time working with this material? Do I want to be looking at this color for that amount of time and then wear it or use it or have it in my home after I've spent that much time working with it? It's kind of a practical thought, but it really did impact my work because I actually was motivated by the colors that I chose. And this Ganchet yarn comes in, it's their cotton yarn, and it comes in a variety of different colors that I feel all work well together. And so when I laid them out at the beginning of 2024 and made up my temperature card, I got really excited with how the colors flowed together and excited to see what the pattern result would be, thinking, oh, I'll start with the pastels in January, and then by December I'll probably be back to the pastels, so I'll work kind of progressively towards the warmer colors and then jump back up to the cooler colors or the colder temperatures. And that in fact is mostly what happened. And so getting to see that pattern flow has been very motivating because each day or every few days I'm changing color, which means a whole lot of tails to weave in, but the actual crocheting and seeing the next color and the next color build up on itself has been very exciting and cool to see. So the materials that you choose are very important. Not just the color either. If you don't like working with the material for whatever reason, then you're also going to get frustrated by that. One of my early issues with this yarn was that I was struggling with a lot of splitting. It's more of a, I think, knit-friendly yarn than crochet-friendly yarn. Just the way it's twisted, I kept punching my crochet hook through it. That could be user error and my lack of skill as a crochet artist, but I was struggling with that quite often, and I have some places at the beginning that I had to take out because there were just some split pieces that looked bad. However, as time went on, I learned to really love working with this yarn, and even from the beginning I love the color, I love the feel. It's very cooling but also heavy, so it feels nice. It feels like a weighted blanket when you're wearing it or using it. And so there was just a lot of reasons that I chose to go ahead and move forward with this yarn, even though there were a few things that were kind of frustrating at first. So kind of maneuvering that balance between, does the material do what you want it to do? Is it easy to work with? Does it create the outcome that you want? And are there any things that are going to just stand out and bug you throughout the entire process, or do some outweigh the others? So choosing color or material is very impactful in staying motivated. That's what I've discovered. And you can see there are a lot of color changes in this blanket because I chose such small temperature windows that I was changing quite often. So at the beginning, I have a lot of tails to weave in that I haven't done yet. Once I got about to March, I started weaving them in as I went, and that I'm going to thank my past self for that gift, because way less for most of the year that I have to weave in, just the places where I ran out of the length and had to add in a new piece mid-row or something like that. My temperature card consists of 12 different colors, and I chose 12 because when I chose these yarns and pulled them together, I chose all the colors that I liked in combination and decided that 12 seemed like a pretty good number because we have a fairly wide range of temperatures that we experience in the Pacific Northwest, or at least where I live. I wanted to have lots of color changed and have lots of variety, and that definitely happened. If I were to do this again, I might go with a few less colors, maybe 8 or 9 instead of 12, because the color leaps, or because I had to change so often. There are places where the colors kind of fade into each other, partially because of my stitch row, partially because they're just shorter rows. And I could have gotten away with slightly larger temperature windows and less colors. I'm happy with how this turned out. I'm just thinking ahead and sharing my experience on how this went. So 12 colors was a lot. Also, the other thing was that this light blue, we only experienced this temperature range in January of 2024. This is when it snowed here, and we didn't experience that through the whole rest of the year. And the chocolate, I'm pretty sure it's right here. It's basically smack dab in the middle of the blanket. And that was just 2 days that we had over 100-degree temperatures here. So really, the blue or the light blue and the chocolate only show up for, I don't know, maybe 8 of the rows of this entire 365 row blanket. So essentially, I have 10 colors that show up often. Even still, I guess that is a point to say less colors is totally fine. 2 of them hardly got used on my color card. And I think I already mentioned this, but just to do my due diligence, this is Ganchet yarn. Ganchet is a macrame, knitting, crochet, and weaving supply company, and this is their cotton yarn. It comes in a variety of different colors, and over the year I did have to reorder a few different colors, and I ended up with a few balls here, quite a lot of balls here, that I didn't use up because the colors didn't come up very often. I have a lot of chocolate left and a lot of light blue left, like I was just saying, because I didn't use very much of that color. I ended up ordering extra red in the middle of the summer because it was showing up so often on my temperature card. I decided I might run out and I didn't want to have that happen, so I ordered that ahead of time and then didn't end up using it. A few of these colors I ordered at the last minute, just kind of doing a broad sweep of the different colors that I thought I might need, and then ended up ordering these. This is their colorway. I think this is cinnamon, which wasn't even on my temperature card. I just decided I liked the color and liked the yarn, and so wanted to order it so that I could save on shipping and have that for another project. So these don't actually need to be in this basket, but that's why they're in there. Some colors left. I have lots of little bits that I think will probably get used up here in my last few rows, but then I have some fun yarns to incorporate into another project and play around with for something else. The crochet pattern that I'm doing, I went over in a video last year. I'll link it up here if you're interested. I'm using a size F or 3.75 millimeter crochet hook, and this has been really comfortable to work with, and it makes a really nice stitch in combination with this cotton yarn. So I've been really pleased by this. As far as the size of this blanket, it's way too big. If I did a temperature blanket again, I would make it much smaller. This is going to end up in like a queen size bed blanket, which means that every row that I've done has taken me like at least 15 minutes to crochet. So I don't even want to do the math on how much time that is over the last 365 days. This was a commitment, I'll say that. And I'm not doing a temperature blanket this year to kind of give myself a break. I think I'll pick it up in 2026 and choose some fun yarns and do a baby blanket, because that's about the size that I feel like I can handle after this one. However, the results of this are really cool, and I think that even though I kind of wail about the size and how heavy it is and all of that, I am super pleased with it. I'm very proud of the progress, and just having made something so large feels kind of impressive to myself, so that's pretty fun. I'm not going to show you a full reveal just yet because I still have to finish, but I will. Okay, now the bonus tip, and I think you'll understand why this one's my favorite as soon as I say it. When you're working on a long-term project, don't entirely eliminate the ability to work on other projects. What I mean by that is don't limit yourself to just one single project when you're working on a long-term project. I found that at the beginning of 2024, I was thinking in the mindset of, oh, I have a temperature blanket I'm working on. If I have time to work on a project, that's what I need to be working on. and quickly started to kind of have this not really logical mentality towards it of like, ugh, this is work. This is a project I have to work on. And it's stopping me from getting to try new things or do this other pattern that I just got excited about, or knit this sweater. So there was a season where, I think especially in the summer, where I needed a travel size project, which this was not by that point. And I decided to start this cinema sweater. So I spent like a month and a half not working on my temperature blanket, which maybe I wouldn't advise going quite that long not working on your project, and just working on my cinema sweater, which actually kind of boosted my motivation, because when I came back to this, I had a refreshed motivation and interest in this and was able to kind of come at it fresh. It also gives you the permission to explore new things, new patterns, learn a new skill, I don't know, take a break and experience something different for a while, which will then, I feel, just refresh and encourage your long-term project, because it's not becoming stagnant and something that you have to do. You have the freedom to explore other things if you want to, and come back to it as, you know, in your set times that you've blocked and set aside. Back from tip number 1, which was create sustainable systems, like setting aside 1 day a week to work on that long-term project. This way you can also have projects going for different circumstances, which I am a huge fan of. Having a travel-friendly project, a project that you can work on while watching TV, a project you can work on while going for a walk, a project you can work on while hanging out with friends and maybe doesn't require quite as much attention, something that's a little more challenging that you have to focus on and that sharpens your skills and grows your creative practice because it's developing something new or challenging you in some way. So having all those kinds of projects going at once, I'm a big fan of that. And I felt that that worked well in tandem with this long-term project, because especially at about month 7, this thing was becoming so unwieldy and heavy that I didn't want to travel with it. So I had other projects like this sweater that I could travel with, or when it was sunny out, I was weaving baskets because I could get the water bins outside, or doing natural dye projects because the garden was producing. And so having those kinds of things going and not just saying, all I can work on is this one thing. Now, if you are a single project at a time kind of person, this bonus tip is not for you, absolutely. And I totally understand that mentality where you work sequentially one thing at a time. It definitely saves on some overwhelm and the chaos of having lots of things going at once and kind of having to change your brain set moving from one thing to the next. However, I have found that it frees me up and keeps me motivated if I have a lot of things going at once. Not directly at once, but you know, in the same general time frame. Well, I'm to that final point in a project where I get to reveal the finished piece. I've finished. Oh, I'm so excited, so pleased with how this turned out. I'm going to lay it out on my bed and show you in its full glory. Look at it. Look at all of these colors. It is so colorful. It's quite busy. Very grandma's Afghan-esque with all of these colors, but I love it. The Ganchet yarn is really comfortable. I was over at my sister's working on it last night, and we were curled up on the couch under it watching a TV show, and I had to bring it home with me, and she's like, "Aw, I don't want to take it off." So it's quite heavy, as I mentioned earlier. And so when you're under it, it just feels very soothing because the cotton yarn is pretty dense. And so, yeah, it ends up making a very like weighted blanket-esque blanket. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have this finished. Not just because, you know, now I get to use it, or because I get to start another project, but because this was a year's endeavor, and to have successfully completed a full year's project that was like there was something that I needed to do per day um, feels like a huge accomplishment. So, yeah, I am very pleased with this. And I definitely, now that I've completed it, I definitely think that I will end up doing something like this again, smaller than this size, but the concept of a temperature blanket idea is very intriguing and very fun to actually put into process or actually do. I was more aware and in sync with the weather and temperatures than I probably have ever been before because I was looking at it regularly, and so just more in sync with what the environment was like, which actually helped working in the garden over the summer because and into the fall, because I knew when the plants needed more water because it had been more dry, or things, not even just the temperature but just what the weather was doing in general. Because I was looking at temperature, I was more aware of it. So I did end up with pastels. This is the beginning of the year. Went into more of the brights into the spring. I think this is around like April, May, this section. And then into the summer, we get into the reds and grays in the summer, and then fall right about here, and then excuse me, into the winter, and December is right here at the end. So I did repeat that kind of pastel-y beginning and end, and then lots of brights and darks in the middle. It's not directly like a fold in half equal on both sides, but it's cool to see how that kind of gradiated and then back through the year. So I am very pleased with how this turned out. I'm going to share a link for Ganchet in the description below. We have a coupon code you can find down there for their products. I highly recommend this yarn, though I would say it'd be much easier to knit with than it was to crochet with, but it's really pleasant. We'll see how it wears over time. I think this is going to end up either being at the foot of our bed to grab if we need another layer, or be on the top as a cover because it's so pretty, and maybe at some point end up in the studio as my desk blanket because it gets pretty chilly up there. So in the winter, I like to have something to curl up with my desk. And thank you for encouraging me and supporting me through this experience. To check out Ganchet's coupon code. We are affiliated for them, so we do get a small percentage if you use that link. Thank you very much for doing that. It does help us continue to be able to put out content here on YouTube and free content on our website. If you need a video to watch while you're working on one of your projects, check this video out up here. Subscribe to our email list to get tips, resources, other artists that we're enjoying, and other fun things that are happening here at Textile Indie. Until next time, happy making. Bye.